I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the live session for the Barton Hills Brickhouse with Baldridge Architects. I'd like to thank our title sponsored Dalgleish Construction Company, as well as the underwriters for this session and for the home, Arrowhead Construction and Baldridge Architects. And with that, I will turn it over to Burton Baldridge.
Hi. So I'm Burton Baldridge, obviously, at Baldridge Architects. We're a 9-person firm. And the purpose of this lecture is basically to show off the house. So with that said, I'm going to share a little presentation. If you have any questions in the middle of it, if I can see over there, you can ask in the middle, or we can wait till the very end. So this is the Barton Hills Brickhouse. The title of this sort of lecture, this is a house obviously in Barton Hills. And the title of this is Keep Listening, because this was an evolving project. It was a design that went all the way through construction as the ambitions of the project slightly changed. And as we started to realize at certain points that maybe we weren't listening enough, or how best intentions can make a simple house complicated. So I do want to thank everybody at the AIA Homes Tour for allowing us to do this. So on some level, this is a walkthrough of the process of the design and construction of a well-executed custom home with difficult site constraints. There's going to be some breakaway to discuss some CEU topics, because this is supposed to be a CEU. So for the people who are just architecture fanatics, most of this is geared towards you. Some of this is geared towards the architects in the crowd because they get credit for it. But showing off a house and getting credit for it is kind of, they're strange bedfellows, but I'll do the best I possibly can with it. On the CEU front, we're going to talk a teeny bit about like local codes and how it shaped this, particularly difficult site constraints, how to translate a client program into a schematic design. We're going to do that through this house. And we're going to have some talk about building and trying to control cost and managing budget in a design, in a cost plus scenario. But in this case, the design kind of morphed and changed and continued all the way through construction administration, which is sort of typically, hold on one second, I'm gonna put a timer on. How our projects roll, we do run a pretty strong construction admin practice here. But we're also gonna talk about, a bit about how the ambitions of the project subtly changed throughout the course of design. So with that, here we go. Keep listening. So we did design on this and we worked, the only way to really control cost in a sort of a cost plus scenario is to work with a trusted partner. And we worked with Arrowhead Construction, who we've worked with on numerous projects in the past. They did this, which is also in Barton Hills, this, which is in the Zilker area. So we have really deep experience with them. And we thought that they would be a really good partner for this project in particular. When you're working with a cost plus thing, you're relying essentially on a really loaded estimate, which they did very well. And then it is a continual conversation and communication with our clients, who were awesome people, and rebidding, redrawing, trying to make sure that at the end of the day, you end up with a successful process that's not too painful. Now that was a rendering of the Barton Hills Brickhouse. That's when the brick was still black. But the nice thing about this sort of an arrangement as a delivery vehicle is it does allow some flexibility. Now, there's some risk involved, and that's why you typically are working with a truly trusted partner. From our end, it did sort of require a continual process of listening, not just hearing our clients, but trying to understand the balance between experience and budget they were trying to achieve. So a little bit about us, for those who don't know who we are. Obviously we're an Austin, Texas firm. Our roots were in design build. Now this is not a Baldridge house, but this is a house I was intimately involved in. This is a floating box house. And I built it as a builder when I was still working for Peter Gluck and Partners. And all of our early work was sort of produce, design, build. This is my house. In 2010, we jettisoned that model because, well, I'm not going to get into that. That's a lecture in its own right. But we targeted trying to develop a practice that had no declared specialty. We just wanted to be able to work on things that were interesting. And as time's come on, has moved on, we've taken on all sorts of program types. This is a restaurant. We've been in hospitality, institutional work, commercial work, incidentally, also with Arrowhead, educational, and the one-off folly. So the scales and the different types of projects we're doing are really all over the map. But we really do love doing the houses. And this is a house that we are currently drawing that'll be in Westlake. But the nice thing about houses is it's an easier code framework than the commercial projects. And it's the direct interaction with the users to curate an experience that you don't usually get there. Now, also a rendering, now white. One second. Our clients were amazing people. They're both in the music business. It's a husband and wife. They're in the music promotion business. And when he initially came to us, and at the beginning, it was largely just him, he processed most of what he was talking about. He wanted the bedrooms and he wanted things, but he was very adamant about the budget. And most of our discussions early in the process bespoke a level of trust. You know, we talked about effectively, he liked our work and he was putting trust in us, but really wanted to mainly talk about budget and making sure that we allotted the correct amount to landscape and the correct amount to the house. But we had almost no stylistic direction, although she definitely gravitated towards sort of California modern, and we were getting images of hotels with poolscapes, very white and palm tree. So this is kind of where this came from. What we found as the project moved along was that some of the goals in the project were not being fully realized by what we had drawn. Most of them were, but that's where the power of being able to work with a Sarah or Arrowhead was so useful. And at the end of it, I think the biggest thing that we took away from it is just a process of listening. Now, given that he came in talking initially primarily about, I want it to be cool, but I really want to watch the numbers there. And he had this quote at the very beginning, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. He basically said, I don't want you to show me anything that I'm going to want that doesn't fit in the numbers. Just don't do that. So we took it seriously. Unfortunately, the site fought us on this quite a bit. So it's a very difficult site. That's larger than your average Austin lot. It's about 2/3 of an acre. And its frontage is on a cul-de-sac with it opening up way back to the rear. This is the buildable area of the site. And we'll get to it in a second, but it also has really poor soil. So for access and for economy, we immediately understood that we needed to try to keep the house within this flatter part of the site. So that's what we took as our initial design constraint, rather than stretching off into the remainder of it. An unfortunate thing about a site that's shaped is it gives you a really peculiar building intent, because the McMansion code in Austin that limits the scale of buildings is really sort of promulgated thinking about a rectangular lot. And this thing is, you know, vaguely diamond shaped. The further we push back towards the street, where it would be most cost efficient to build, the harder it was to get the building to actually fit within the tent. And this is sort of where we ended up on the final project. Now, the other site constraint, which was absolutely terrible, was that this is some of the worst soil I've ever encountered in Austin. So if you ever see a street that looks like this with all of these patched tar lines, you know you're dealing with expansive clay. And that is absolutely what we had on this site. When we started, now this is a rendering, we decided as a way to go about this was to create rules for ourselves. Rules that basically prevented the people in my firm, me, Brian, Michael, everybody, from going back to tactics we've used before that end up being expensive. We didn't want to do anything that relied on thinness, like you see here, because thinness requires steel, and that's an extra shell of money. So we also wanted to make sure that anything we did was achievable with trusses, with wood trusses, so that we wouldn't have difficult MEP coordination plus the cost of the steel sequence. We didn't want to have any sort of excuse me, sorry about that. We wanted to achieve everything with punched windows. Basically, we didn't want everything to go all the way up to the ceiling and all the way to the floor, because that's more taxing to coordinate. So we were trying to do something awesome that allowed us to have expressed headers on the inside. We immediately said we did not want to do anything that was carpentry intensive, so that we were not relying on flush detailing and kissing corners and those things that are so difficult to coordinate. We wanted to stay away from difficult material sequences or taxing alignments. We wanted to stay away from global cabinetry strategies that would cost drive the cost of the building up. And importantly, they didn't really want that, right? They wanted an indoor-outdoor house with exterior living, and that's what we tried to get to. So we produced two schemes. This is, once again, what we thought was our buildable lot, where we were going to stay. And the initial scheme, one of the two initial schemes, is not the one that is built there. This was a pretty efficient building that stayed off the slope with a small pool. Roughly provides the same sort of stuff as what we ultimately ended up with. This is about 3,100 square feet. And that's what this would have looked like with its small pool right there. And it would have been a nice house. But there was another scheme that was far more exciting, and that's the one we have now. And our clients, you can see here, you know, and you'll see some of these things, this interior planner, and, you know, we've got this sort of artwork stair. So we're already with this one starting to violate our own rules, but we've stayed where we needed to be on the site, and it does have a small pool. So that's the upstairs, which is pretty much the way it is presently, and it's a little different. Our clients definitely liked the second scheme better, and frankly, so did we, but with one caveat. They wanted a larger yard. They wanted to be able to, they didn't want to have to go down to that larger landscape, which is kind of boggy, and it was difficult to see how that would work out because it would have involved stairs. So now we are already in violation of our primary rule. Our primary rule was stay off the steep part of the slope. And what we ended up with were colossal stem walls done in board form concrete. And these aren't walls that were there to hold the house up anymore. This was to hold the landscape. Moreover, because they had a real concern about safety, we needed to terrace it, because otherwise the stem wall at this corner would have been close to 15 feet. And we had this idea, in lieu of a handrail, that we would do this planter and have large plants that would prevent you from, you know, sort of catapulting off the side of the building. What that ended up becoming, however, unfortunately, as a result of the soil, is one of the most complicated foundations we have ever coordinated. You are looking there at 95 piers, because we're in expansive clay, and a steel sequence to hold up the floor. So effectively, that is the first stage of the foundation, with the pour on the top and then pan deck above the floor. And the question to some of you might be, why didn't we just do all of it slab on grade once we'd started? And the reason is that the soil was bad enough that all of the foundation that was slab on grade was put on piers and then poured on top of what are called void cartons. These are cardboard boxes. And so the slab is basically just suspended on those piers, and that stuff below remains empty. The problem is that if this is where your bathroom is, for instance, and the soil heaves enough, it'll actually push your toilet out of the ground. So that means we ended up with this sort of hybrid. So now we're in violation of rule number 2. We've got big stem walls, and we've also got a steel sequence coming. And you can see that at the stem walls, to hold this planter, which we thought was a fairly spiffy idea, ended up being quite an ordeal just to hold it up and make sure that this was sturdy and could do what it was supposed to do. You see there just the amazing work that Arrowhead used to be called Acero. I'm going to keep doing that. We call them Acero head. They did just lovely work, and the concrete board form was unparalleled, just really beautiful on that. One other thing, I would love to say that this is our building. It is not. This is Studio KO. This is the Yves Saint Laurent Museum. We were interested because we designed what was almost a high modernist form. We thought it would be nice to do it in masonry. And we were really gravitated towards playing games with the patterns on it to do something with the facade so that the windows, which were much smaller, would have a reason to be where they were placed. And we'd been doing some of these sort of patternings on buildings in the past. So we understood how to go about it. We ended up with a Flemish bond with bits and pieces stuck out to create shadow lines. And it was, really interesting watching this all go together. But the reason that works really well on the Yves Saint Laurent Museum is because the bottom of it is super solid. In our case, the bottom is not solid. So now here we are with, yes, once again, best intentions going against us, more steel to hold the brick up. As we progressed on the project, we started to realize with Houston, who basically said he didn't want to be shown things that he couldn't afford, but if it was something that was awesome, he wanted to see it. So we were getting all sorts of sort of ideas and realizing that to some extent, our understanding of the ambitions of the house had changed or we had misunderstood them. So the initial idea of the stair was going to be something like this. It would have relied on some difficult reglet work, but it was a simple stair between drywall, although we had brick on one side. What we did instead was I had this idea and I took it to our client and basically said, this is going to be awesome. And it's obviously also going to be a change order. And what we've done here is conceived of the stair as a vessel sitting in the house, and it's just this wood box. But in true Baldridge form, having a wood box alone wasn't enough. What is actually happening here is it's coordinated with the boards. So the floorboard runs up the wall, down the side. These run down across the stair and back up the other side. So now we've got this singular, beautiful stair, but we are in violation of yet another of the rules we started off with, which was no difficult alignments, no global cabinetry strategies, nothing that was going to be that sort of amazingly taxing. At the end of the day, it's beautiful. Our clients were amazing about it. They, said, is it good? And I was like, yeah, it's going to be good. And they were all on board. Another interesting moment, and this is another place where, working with a trusted partner like Arrowhead was useful to us, had to do with the swimming pool. Now, the pool and the outdoor sort of living rooms and everything were of paramount importance to our clients. This was really a house, but it's really about being outdoors. And they wanted a pool and a spa, and this is what we designed. At a certain point, because they are safety conscious people, they asked, how do we get a pool cover in here? I don't know if we dropped a ball on that, but we didn't have a pool cover design, and it's a pool with a flag shape. So we're going to end up with effectively what would have been a large box at the back, like a bench. And the idea ultimately was to lift the lawn so that we could at least get the pool cover to relate to what had already been designed. So now we have another stair tread up to the lawn, but it ended up being really beautiful and kind of interesting. So this is where we ended up, because there are no global sort of photographs of the building. This being the frontage with the weathered steel walls and the board forming. And you can see at this point in time, we're still thinking that our spiffy idea of having plants to keep them from catapulting off of their large lawn was a great idea. Ultimately, I think they were less sold on that idea. So we did more redesign with Arrowhead and managed to get some really nice handrails in there that were done in mesh. Probably the smart move. But you know, this being the front of the house, it's a very energy efficient house. All of the brick has a gap behind it. It's white. And all of the wood, which is Ipe, was done on a rain screen. So this kind of gives you a sort of a 360 of what the house actually is. Rolling around this side being probably the most difficult part of the lot to work on. And I don't think our grading is correct in our model. I do think the vertical grade is much steeper than what we're showing right here. But you can see the thickness that Brian Bedrosian designed in at the mid-story that made this entire house trussable and achievable with trusses. And you can see our instinct to have punched windows that would be easier to deal with on the inside, that we use this sort of brick patterning to give them a sense and a reason to occupy the place they occupied. Because one of the things I do not like about some architecture you see is when it has the kind of Mr. Potato Head aesthetic, like stick a window here, stick a thing there. So we really wanted this to have a bit of sense to it. Coming into the back, you know, you can see the little exterior living room. So it's not like it was just a big pool deck. This breaks down into little rooms outside so that there's more than one kind of occupation when you're outside at the pool. All the windows are pretty efficient down at the bottom, the larger sliders, because they are under deep overhang, which almost completely eliminates any nature of solar heat gain. And you can see the view into their bedroom. They get to look out onto their poolscape, which once again was, I think, the most important part of the house to them. And rolling back, that's effectively, you know, where our head was. Now, this was a design development model, so there are minor differences. The fireplace doesn't quite look like this, but that's where we were headed on all of this. And this is, as you likely know, let me see how I'm doing on time. This is where we ended up. So this is the entry of the house. For those who don't know it, City of Austin does have a minor accessibility code for houses. It's not as stringent as it is for a commercial project, but it is definitely, this is the, you have to have a bathroom on the ground floor with a door, access to a kitchen, access to a den. So this is the sort of accessible entry in. And then of course, back here at the back of the house, you can see the weathered steel wall, you know, such a simple form after all of that labor by Arrowhead to try to get it right. And you can see our instinct in there where that mid-story truly relates to what the building is supposed to be, but the original impetus behind it was one born of cost necessity, to try to get this to where we could achieve as much as possible with trusses. Into the main room. That picture of the horns was not on the actual photo taken by Tobin, so I'm sorry about that, but I wanted something there. And then looking out at their sort of suspended, structured landscape. And you can see down here, you can see where we've managed to get the pool cover tucked in. On the inside, we wanted this to be a light and bright house, and it was what they wanted. So you walk in on a small garden on the interior. Ultimately, our clients ended up working with Allison Crawford Design to do furnishing and some of the finishes. So you'll see as we go through this, some of the places where our clients really wanted to play with the house. They didn't want us to design something that was so finely fitted out that it effectively prevented them from using it as a canvas to their fairly eclectic tastes. So a good example would be, the master bathroom on the left. That's clearly got a lot of Baldridge in there. That's a Baldridge bathroom. But on the right, where Allison and our clients were working together, the Muhammad Ali wallpaper and the pink vessel and the touches of brass, and it's a lot bolder, and it's definitely was great to be able to work with them and have them unleash sort of potentials in the house that we wouldn't have put there otherwise. But very bright. You can see with the windows not going floor to ceiling, how that plays out on the inside. The skylight above the tub and the bathrooms, WC and a shower tucked behind this with this really pretty marble wall. Of course, the stair, which we've spoken about a bit, but I do love it. Now, once again, we started off with no kissing corners and nothing difficult, and there we go. Still like it. And rolling here over upstairs, one of the important parts of the project for our clients is he's a gamer, and this is a room where he can play Xbox and be online with his friends doing that, but where it is not conspicuous and everywhere else in the house. And then outside to a deck, and you can see some of her bolder taste coming through here with the pink clay tile and then this hanging chair that came from Allison Crawford, which is really pretty fun. And obviously, just bring something to the house that otherwise wouldn't have been there. And looking out to the landscape, you can see where we've tucked in the grill. The speakers and all the audio in here was done by Total Home Technology. And they've just done my office, and those guys are amazing and they're great to work with. But rolling through at the pool, you can see now there's the handrail that aligns with the wall, but another one, and that will ultimately be sort of covered in plants. Rolling out to the exterior into what basically is an urban meadow. And this was done by Adam Barb. And this is maybe one of my favorite parts of the process. So here is, a photo of the house at night, and with their sort of multi-leveled landscape so that they can entertain. But it's been interesting because we finished this right at the dawn of the pandemic. It's easy enough to look at the landscaping that's contained within this, but one of my favorite things that happens, so we've got a nice Palo Verde there and all of these xeric plants, and Adam is immensely talented. But there was always a question as to what was going to happen with the remainder of the site, because as you recall, we kept the building up towards the throat, up towards the street. And it presented an opportunity out of something that was kind of a liability, because in the back, this piece of property has obviously expansive clay soil, so it was a little squishy. All of the drainage from the surrounding houses basically would collect here. And we always felt that the idea of this house was something that should emerge from the landscape. Speaking to a female side of our client team, what she really wanted was something that was, had that sort of California Palm Springs vibe to it. So we were working to get them someplace like Austin, Texas meets Palm Springs meets Marfa. And rolling out into this, it's pretty amazing because again, we're talking about 2/3 of an acre. You can see the little path that Adam has cut through there. But this is a landscape out here that has to be edited at the very beginning, but effectively needs no maintenance. And that is really pretty astounding. I have tried to put a video in here where you can actually hear this. I don't think it's working so well on it, but the really cool thing about an urban meadow is that it's restorative. It recycles the water well. It's really, you're not putting a lawn, you're not putting chemicals on it. The thing I hadn't anticipated is every time you were there, it has a sound, it has an ambience, it has birds chirping and flying, and it has insects buzzing about. And I don't know if you're going to be able to hear this, but we're going to try. And if you couldn't hear it, I could. So at the end of all of this, the question at the end of any project is, was it a success? There is no getting around the fact that it was more expensive than was initially anticipated. The other scheme at the end of the day might have seemed more cost conscious, but we would have obviously had the same foundation issues and would have had to extend the lawn to get these, to really realize what our clients were looking for. And within this entire process, I laid out all of those rules at the beginning, and we violated all but 2 of them in making this really singular sort of house. But at the end of the day, it was a constant communication with Arrowhead Construction and with our clients. And we spoke about what we were doing and did they approve it. And it was a really collegial and happy project. And at the very end, the best thing I could say is that they're happy there. And we finished this right at the dawn of the pandemic. So one of the best things that happened is they moved in, I believe it was late December. But then as the music business shut down, they were able to lock down in a house that achieved all of the things that they were looking for. And I don't think I could feel better about it than that. So this, was supposed to be a full 45 minutes, but I seem to have finished a little bit early. So I can open this up to Q&A, although I am not positive how to do it. So, hello, Courtney or someone?
Burton, we do have some questions for you. If you go down to the bottom of your screen, can you see Q&A? If not, I can read them off to you.
That's fine. I can do it.
Okay. Are you got it?
I do. I have it. I see some stuff. So Diane is, and I'm not going to attempt your last name, is asking whether or not the ipe is oiled or whether it will be left to be weathered. Most of the ipe in this project is held under overhang, or at least some overhang. Some of it at the front is probably a little bit more exposed. We did go ahead and treat the ipe, and I believe we did it with Pinafin. When wood on the faces of buildings ages, it has a tendency to do it in a differential fashion, and it's not always that attractive unless you continue to oil it. But in this case, given that most of it's in the shade, we think that the maintenance on it is going to be, a little less severe. If we were going to let it age, we would have treated it with a material called Valhalla, which will force it gray at the beginning. And we've done that on a house before. That way, the parts that are in the shade don't lamp up like ipe for forever, and the rest of it ages gray. So, do I recall where the staircase handrail was sourced? I assume you're talking about the interior handrail. We just drew that. And one thing that's not showing in those photos, it was just built by steel fabricators. It was a U-channel held upside down, and it has an LED light in it. And I do know that somewhere, and maybe in the other photos, Tobin has a picture of that sparked up. It's really pretty cool. Rick Geyer, not until, okay. Murray, Murray approves of the switch from black to tan. That's not really a question, but thank you, Murray. Who was the pool contractor and who was the landscape architect? I do not remember who the pool contractor is. You'll have to get that from the people at Arrowhead. And I assume Tyson's out there somewhere. If he is, he should chime in on this. The landscape architect, largely on that, all of the exterior landscaping was designed by us. So anything you wrap your knuckles against was designed by us. All of the planting and then that meadow in the back was done by Adam Barb, and his company is called CoLab. And he's just lovely to work with, and we've worked with him on our office as well, and it gets installed in about a week. Murray's asking, can I describe the basic CA structure? Do we do weekly meetings, cloud-based CA software, et cetera? How do we manage CA on a job like this? This job was pre-pandemic, but we really haven't changed the way we do CA very much. We reserve a large part of our contract to CA, and we are there at the job site for a weekly OAC meeting, at least once, typically once a week. We're kind of junkies about the construction. It's where the design build in us comes out. It's not the most profitable way to work, but when we get to the real finish coordination at the end, we're usually at the job sites a couple of times a week. When it's the projects that are remote, it is less frequent than that. And we're usually just doing basically online meetings and meeting there a little less frequently, particularly in Wyoming and particularly in like Fredericksburg. What was my favorite detail? Diane's got all the great questions. I love that stair, but I actually like the poolscape. I think the terracing of the pool to break down that stem wall resulted in one of my very favorite things about the entire house. The pool decking material is all, where it's not lawn, it is all concrete. So that is just concrete. We did it to a honed finish, not a super slick finish. And where it's not lawn, there is some the place down where the tables are, where it's concrete pads sitting in gravel that are kind of part of the planterscape. David Cooper, the material is called Valhalla, and that's a chemical that will force wood to go gray. And if you go by our website, there is a project called the Greenbelt Overlook House. It didn't go completely gray, and we've got it there on cedar. Was there a challenge in minimizing the columns with supporting the expanse of the brick? Not really. We, in our firm, kind of try to avoid having anything that's just like a single lolly column. So we tried to design it as almost a randomized screen, but we were working with one of our favorite engineers on this. We were working with Dennis Duffy, and it's typically pretty easy to go back and forth with him and get to where we need to. You know, he was pretty clear about some places he wanted it. And there's a trade-off, because the fewer columns we had, the thicker the steel was going to be. And we were trying to, at least keep the steel sequence down. If I had one do-over, Jim Sussman, what would it be? That's a great question. I really like the house, and I think it serves what they were asking for really well. I don't know that I would do anything over. If I had one do-over, probably would be a rectangular pool, so that they don't have to move their pool furniture every time they shut the pool screen. Which detail am I most proud of? That's Diane again. Oh wait, no, you've already done that, I think. Can I talk more about the building energy efficiencies? Yes. Green was not the primary driver on this building, but everything we do, we try to have be at least tacitly sustainable. Given that all of the exterior materials are separated from the framing on the inside, the sheathing, by an air gap, it's basically a rain screen technology. It's a really efficient way to build a building, right? An energy efficient way to do it. Initially, the brick was going to be black, which would have been far less energy efficient. So with super thick walls, everything was done with at least 2x6s, polyisomine foam insulation, and that air gap around the whole outside. While not quite as good as, for instance, a continuous blanket of exterior insulation, it's a pretty efficient house. I haven't actually talked to them what their bills look like, but that would be interesting to know. And I think, who was the brick manufacturer? Drew, we got them from Upchurch, Kimbrough, and it was not the original brick we had specified. We had specified another white, and there was a lead time issue. And I will have to get Laura Grenard or somebody in the office to tell me which one we ended up with. So, and there are a few other questions that kind of start to get a little more specific about budget and things like that, but I'm probably not going to go there on this one. Charles Di Piazza is asking, what was our design process for residential projects, models, sketches, renderings, walkthroughs? Charles, it varies from project to project. Back in the day, you can see behind us, we always used to like to do physical models. Every now and then, we'll have a client who is averse to digital media, just like hates it. And they're really turned off by the digital models. Usually within this firm, unless it's Brian Bedrosian designing, people are designing with a model in Rhino. Pretty flamed out model that continues to roll as we design and test things out. We keep that going to test out design things throughout the project. Sometimes we do panoramas, sometimes we do walkthroughs, sometimes we do, if it'll allow it, a bunch of really, really polished renderings, but we try to defer those so we don't get locked into something. But then there are clients like the restaurant owners at Gardner. They didn't want to see digital stuff. So our models for that were all wood. And I once, there's a serial restaurateur in Austin named Larry McGuire, and Larry once interviewed us for a project, and he absolutely detests them, just hates them. So it really kind of depends. There is usually a Rhino model that walks with us. Some of our projects are delivered in CAD. This project was delivered in Revit, in part, because unfortunately, I don't know Revit yet, although I'm learning it. And Laura, who had built the model, stepped out to have their child, and very suddenly I was stuck managing the project with a piece of software I didn't know. So that was interesting. Be available when Thank you, Deb Lewis. Yeah, for anybody who's in District 5, my wife is running for school board. You need to vote for her. Her name's Lynn Boswell. Marissa Grande is asking, finished material alignments on the exterior are critical here. Do you select the datum heights early in the process or finalize them during CA phase? We do pretty robust construction drawings, and we understood that the brick module was going to be the real driver because we wanted everything to end up on a full brick. There is a 1/2 inch that I could explain to you that gets lost in this project, and it has to do with the sill plate, but you can't see it. But to answer your question, we knew down to that 1/2 inch that was in the middle of the project how we had to produce the building and how it had to be done. That cannot be done without a very good mason and a very good builder. So in particular, Tyson at Arrowhead and then Troy put up, and there may be still a picture on Instagram, a full-scale story stick, basically a print of the brick module on the side of the building. So in multiple locations, so that alignments would not be lost. And think, do you build the lighted bathroom mirrors in-house? We have them fabricated. All of the cabinetry in here was done by Buda, custom woodwork. And that particular mirror design is something that was drawn by Brian Bedrosian. And we've used something like it on a few projects. I really like it though. I think that may be pretty much it, at least what I'm prepared to answer. So a little bit about flat roof material. This is from Muna. The flat roof material, I think it's a TPO roof. It may be PVC. And somebody was asking about Buda and Brian Bedrosian. Buda Custom Woodworks was our millworker. Brian Bedrosian is an owner here. He's one of Baldridge Architects. And he's an insanely gifted designer. Oh, and somebody just posted Brian's LinkedIn. Awesome. If you try to hire him, I'm coming after you. Okay. Oh, there's also some questions down in chat. Well, when did we involve the structural engineer in the design? We get the structural engineer in right after schematic design, almost immediately. Ideally, we can get structural engineer in, and by the time we're at about 50% design development, our clients have a reasonable pricing set. So, and they can't get a pricing set without that. So we'll do schedules and things like that. And that usually is sufficient to permit with. So that if we have any problems with City of Austin, which these days, it's only problems with City of Austin, I think City of Austin should take some cues from what AIA has pulled off here. I mean, AIA changed their entire tour over the course of the pandemic. But ideally, we can put in our design development set and it'll have engineering. And while that works through permitting, we're finishing construction drawings. Ideally, you get to the end of that process, you got a permit in hand, you've got a price that everybody's comfortable with, and you've got completed drawings, and you just keep going. And anything, see if I'm getting them. So I think that pretty much grabs all the questions, but thanks for being here. Who was the technology speaker people again? Total Home Technologies. I typically contact a guy named Shane Flores, and he's just done our office for us, and it's, I got our CFO a couple of days ago, so it's really cool, and they're pretty good at describing what you're getting. The communication's pretty good, and they definitely run a really robust, long support game. Train you, wait to see how everything works, and continue to walk through it, because that can all be pretty daunting. And I think that's pretty much it. This is really strange. I'm just sort of talking at my computer screen. I'm assuming there's still people out there, but anyway. Courtney, anything? I know it ended a little bit early, but.
You can do, you can stay on if you'd like to keep answering questions.
Thank you.
Or we can wrap it up. It's up to you.
I don't see any more.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's,
Good Home looks good, but works even better.
it's true.
Even so, the most daunting thing about this entire presentation is that I'm looking at the list of people who are out there, which is really, really intimidating. But then, of course, my clients are there, and it's like, hope I said all this right. So anyway, I think I'm good. Why don't you go ahead and wrap it up?
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.